Well, it is now 4 o'clock. It's time for this week's Got-IT Talks. This week, actually like last week, um, I'm joined by an expert from Denmark.
Did you just
My
call me a bird?
No, I called you a Dane.
Okay. Okay.
Called you a Dane,
Hmm.
which you are. Last time I checked. Um, but Danielle Drachmann, welcome. And as in
Thank you.
these Got-IT talks, what is a customary a point of order, tell us a little bit and the audience about who you are and why you're actually working with digital health.
So, hi Lars. Thank you for inviting me. Looks like it sounds like we actually don't know each other, but we do. But
We
yes,
do.
I can tell the audience why I'm here and why I work with digital health. My way into digital health began when I gave birth to a child who was sick. And very shortly after, we became aware that he were dependent on digital solutions to merely keep him alive. And when those digital solutions were not enough, I went into research to see if I could help develop some solutions that would help keep him alive. So that's my way into digital health. And then it expanded when I founded a global reaching patient organization where we united all of the families from all over the world who had children who suffered from unexplained Cathodic hypoglycemia, just like my son and also my daughter, and then now also me. And now we are working together to co create better digital solutions for the children suffering from low blood sugar.
So you decided to become a computer programmer to do this?
Well, no, that's a pretty good question. My first research projects, very concrete. These children need a blood glucose monitor to make sure that their blood sugar is not dropping. And the blood sugar, the continuous glucose monitors available on the market is very precise in the high blood sugar, but not very precise in the low blood sugars. Meaning, when we trust the technology, the blood sugar alarm will simply go off and we would be alarmed that the blood sugar was low. Unfortunately, when it's not precise in the low and the patients and the caregivers trust the technology, it can be life threatening if the blood sugar alarm cannot go off. Meaning that I saw a potential for a new innovation if we were to use these technologies in children. So I took a deep dive into the literature after we had a severe incident of Cathodic hypoglycemia where the technology failed. And the literature presented to me the possibility that dogs could actually be used as a technology to identify low blood sugar simply by sniffing to the child. And there has been some studies in the UK showing that these dogs were able to give alarm on diabetes patients. So there is a difference between a diabetes patient and a cathodic hypoglycemic patient. Even though they both have low blood sugar during hypoglycemia, the diabetes patient does not have accelerated metabolism, meaning they don't smell of ketosis, acetone, through their breath when the blood sugar is low. That is the case with cathodic hypoglycemia patients. So I was like, well, we have to have a dog who can smell low blood sugar. But I wasn't able to find anyone in Denmark who could train a dog to detect low blood sugar. So I took this idea about, well, we need to figure out both how and why are they able to do it, and is there a difference between a diabetes patient and a cathodic hypoglycemia patient? If so, what is the difference? So I took this idea and I took it to my mentor at Novo Nordisk, Jacob, and he said, that's an amazing idea, but we need to make sure that we are conducting it a research study that has a stronger statistic power than the studies done in the UK. And we contacted my children's professor at a university hospital in Denmark, and we connected, and we found some dog trainers who had trained dogs to detect bladder cancer and prostate cancer, and they said they thought they were able to train these dogs based on saliva samples. So that was my first research innovation project. We went pretty far. The research protocol was written, but unfortunately, we were not able to raise funds for the project. But that was like my first deep dive into trying to understand what is a technology and how can research be done with patients and caregivers at the center.
So, does that mean that you're passionate about only the use of well, four-legged animals and things that can solve issues related to blood sugar, or do you have a wider interest in digital health?
Yeah, I guess when I started this, I thought that I had an interest in training dogs to detect hypoglycemia so my children would not be in danger when they were sleeping. But very quickly, I found out that the interest was actually to figure out how we can work better together to develop better digital solutions. And not only digital solutions, but quite frank, innovative solutions that works for the benefits of the patients. And to do so, I found that we can actually come pretty far if we start to look at the patient as a stakeholder instead of a research object.
Mm.
So I started with the dogs, but that later led me to be a part of the European Health Parliament in EHP6, where I was in the Committee for Telemedicine and Patient-Centered Care, because the COVID pandemic really showed us how fragile we are when we are not equipped to use the telemedicine currently available. So we, in our patient organization, saw that the isolated patients who were not able to go to the doctor's office when they were afraid for COVID, or they were simply not equipped to go outside the house, they could really benefit from the telemedicine solutions. However, without the COVID pandemic, I don't think that the doctors would really have embraced the telemedicine solutions as they have done today. So we are seeing a trend that these patients are actually suddenly able to access specialized care because the doctors are suddenly forced to dive into the telemedicine solutions and take the doctor's call online, making sure that the most fragile patients all over the world can now get help.
And of course, for our audience, the European Health Parliament is not the same as the European Parliament, um, even though it might argue a lot too. But I mean, telemedicine is a fairly old term in a way,
Yeah.
one that's been around for some time. What was the key focus points then on in the EHP on telemedicine? I mean, the many of the discussions there probably revolved around the future of telemedicine and not so much the history of it, right?
Yeah. I guess the EHP is really trying to frame the recommendations that can be used to frame a better Europe in general. Oh, sorry, that's my husband calling. Um, but we really looked into both what we already have in Europe, but also how can we strengthen the collaboration among the membership countries in Europe. We we came up with 10 recommendations to how we can accelerate telemedicine, and how we can make sure that what works for one country might not work for another. So, how can we take the best practices and support each other to make sure that all European citizens are being embraced? How can we make sure that the trust is something we're working on, not only in one country, but in all countries? How is the accessibility and availability issues being handled? Also, we saw a lot, we focused a lot about reimbursement for patients and their caregivers when they have been involved in research. So today we are really, especially in Denmark, we are looking at patients as someone who can have a voice if we invite them in, But are we seeing patients being paid to be involved in research? No. Are they being paid to be involved in board members, or are we seeing them as an equal stakeholder in a research system? No, we are not. How can we then say that we want to create a Europe where we are co-creating with citizens if we're not respecting their expert opinions? Likewise, we would do with a doctor or someone with an academic degree. So there were a lot of focus points, but really the trust, reimbursement, and the availability was key. And then we also had this idea that if these developers who are developing e-health solution and apps, if they should somehow work together with all of the governments about how, because it's very fragmented currently. We have these doctors who would like to use these apps, but we don't have any label stating this app is actually reaching a standard where the doctors can actually reimburse it to the patient and recommend it to be used. We need some kind of a system where we can have a catalog of all of the approved, just like we have with the EMA or the FDA, where they approve drugs. We need to make sure that it's very transparent for the doctors when they have the patients to say, oh, you have diabetes. Then I know it's these apps I can recommend because someone else has actually looked all of the criteria for me to be able to reimburse it to you. So yeah, that was really it took time, but we really believe that we need to work together with the stakeholders, and we need to make e-health and apps much more transparent in Europe, so we feel confident as healthcare professionals to also recommend it to be used by the patients.
But thinking then, of course, of stakeholders and having a voice. I mean, the Got-IT project, of course, focuses on delivering a tool or a guideline for digital developers. So, in your work in the EHP, is there some points that you think that especially digital developers should consider more when either talking to other stakeholders or politicians, or what would you recommend that they focus on?
I really believe that the co-creation, not only with the patients, but also with the healthcare professionals. So a multi-stakeholder co-creation process would be the key. If we are to ensure that what they are developing is both accessible, available for the healthcare professionals and the patients, but also relevant, because what one developer thinks is a very good idea might be a good idea, but it's not possible for the patients to access it because they can simply not read all of the text that's very small, or the healthcare professionals cannot use it because they can simply not comprehend how to use it. So just like with any other innovation in the healthcare system, a multi-stakeholder co-creation process would definitely be the key. And that is also something we are mentioning in the recommendations, that the co-creation and trust is very, very closely linked with the co-creation. If we are co-creating with patients and healthcare professionals, it's automatically a step towards creating better trust between the developers, the system, and also the patients and the healthcare professionals.
It does sound like a lot of people to involve, right? I mean,
Yeah,
this
definitely.
must
And
take it must take an enormous amount of time and effort.
yes,
Um,
yes, definitely. And that is also why we are trying to scale it down in scientific papers in the Got-IT projects, simply to make sure that it's very, very easygoing. Oh, it's these steps that we can consider when we're going into a co-creation process project with older adults with low e-health literacy, or simply trying to make it very, very, very easy to look into. So what is it that I should do next to move
mm.
forward with the co-creation process? But I also think that it's very, very important to see this as an investment. Like, yes, we can easily say that patient involvement and co-creation, that is good, but it's not simply something you stamp off a paper. it's an investment. It takes time, and it really takes a lot of efforts to do it in a way where all of the stakeholders are being heard, and there is actually co-creation happening. It's like with the patient involvement era that we are hopefully moving away from now. It was like you created this whole idea that if we had a patient um, around the circle with the researchers, and they could then read this research protocol, and then they could tick off that a patient had approved it. It was like that was the gold standard. Now we are moving away from that and into an era where co-creation is another part, where we are not actually letting the patient or the caregiver read someone else's product. We are inviting them in so they can tell the researchers and the developers what is the need, tell us the research questions, and then we can work about it together. But to do that, there is a huge amount of effort, because the language for the citizens, the caregiver, the patient, and the academics might be so different that they talk over the head of each other. They can simply not understand what is being said. So it takes time to make sure that we are on the same page and everyone has been heard.
And also, but these patients, I mean, they're not experts or doctors, or so.
I
How can you
disagree.
expect?
I definitely believe they're experts. No, they might not be doctors, but yes, they're experts by experience.
So, and so using their experience would be the basic building blocks of building any kind of good, well, service, I suppose.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. In
Yes. Yes.
Corona,
Yes.
yeah.
It's like yes. Yes. You can frame it that way, or you can look at it. Okay. So what is when we are reaching out to a huge patient group asking who wants to be involved in this research project, you will see some hands, and those hands will most often be the patient who has the most resources, the patients who has maybe the highest degree of education. So yes, we can invite someone in, and then we can start talking to that person. We just need to be aware that the what comes from that person is solely from that person. They cannot speak on behalf of all of the other patients. We need to make sure we're trying to bridge out to the communities of the patients who does not have interest in being involved in research, or does not have the the capabilities of doing so. Also, those who actually think like you do, like, oh, they are not experts. Well, we disagree, and we need to empower those who did not have their hands up in the air, because those are actually often those that we actually need to reach to find the real gaps in healthcare systems.
I'm not sure that I said that I thought that. I was
Just
just
it came
merely
out of your mouth.
asking. I was merely asking the question. But
Okay.
um, but anyway, when you then do this, I mean, how can you then also, I mean, asking one patient or two patients or 10 patients, I mean, how do you, what do you think about also how to maintain an equitable solution? I mean, as you said before, sometimes if you ask a group of people, the volunteers will be, well, not necessarily representative for the entire population. How do you manage? What do you think in the co-creative process of how to balance inequalities too?
I definitely think that being aware that the community outreach on certain channels will create bias is a big step. But I also think that if we are using different types of community outreach strategies, then we are hopefully able to recruit someone from different backgrounds. But I think it's quite interesting, because I'm involved in a project where we are currently looking into community outreach and how do we make sure that it's actually a representative group of patients that we get in, and it's very difficult. What we have done in the patient organization in KHI is that we are using different strategies, but overall we are working a lot about empowerment. We are continuously talking about what is an expert, who has the right to define a research question, who has the right to call yourself an expert or be involved in research. What is a researcher? Constantly encouraging the voices of the families to be raised, asking out, have you seen anything you wonder could be a correlation in this matter? Oh, you didn't. Well, then we will ask again the week after, and then suddenly we are kind of supporting each other to think out loud, and that approach has led to one of the biggest medical discoveries, I think, in Denmark or worldwide, in this century.
Well,
Yeah,
in all honorable modesty, of course.
yeah.
Yes. But will that then, I mean, if the digital developers use these extra resources and they then develop better digital tools, um, obviously that would lead to a situation where people could download something that was better. Will that then be sort of nirvana? Have we solved the issue that simply by getting better tools um,
That's a
out
very
there?
good question. I guess it depends on the patient and the app. For some, I once had a technology and an app that I thought that's amazing. Then I had it for a week and then I didn't use it because it didn't meet my needs when I actually started using it. Then they redeveloped the app to the need of the parents and the patients. In this sense, it suddenly came with a feature that it could alarm when the blood sugar were critical. And and so instead of me having to go in and check, is something wrong? It would tell me something is wrong. And that has for sure made my life much easier. And now suddenly I'm able to sleep at night. So I definitely believe that, yes, these apps might help and be the nirvana for some patients, but the needs of the patients always evolve. And that's
Mm,
why we need to make sure that the co-creation processes is not stopping by the end of the app has been launched. We need to keep track and make sure that we are still meeting the needs of the patients. And we can't do that if we are not talking to them.
mm. Well, conscious of the we here, but what I was actually trying to nudge an answer out of you of would be, I mean, the patient and the digital developer clearly there to, I wouldn't necessarily say yin yang, but there's an interrelation between the two. But there's a wider healthcare system too out there. I mean, is this the digital future? Is this one where you just have the need of the patients or the people, and then you have digital developers doing something that's wonderful, and then everything will be fine? I mean, what about healthcare professionals? What role do you see them as in this
One of
scenario?
the recommendations we made in the EHP was to make sure that the healthcare professionals was equipped to actually train these patients to use these apps. But to do that, they actually need to make sure that they themselves can use the apps. So what we recommended was that it was simply a part of the curriculum, the digital health. Because if
Hmm.
it's not, then we are sending the healthcare professionals out unarmed to tackle the reality they are suddenly going to face. So I definitely believe that we have a bigger responsibility to make sure that the era of digital is also something that we are educating the healthcare professionals to actually lift. Yeah.
But we're not training them to be better patient educators, right?
No, we are
No.
simply educate. No, 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 no. I don't think so. I think we are training the healthcare professionals to direct the patients into the tools that they hopefully will be using to raise their quality of life, whatever that might be.
Mm.
Um, and we're also seeing an interesting link with the apps and the digital development currently, because we are seeing apps tracking health status of biological health status from the patients, which directly is transferred to the hospital. And some patients love that, and I think a lot of doctors love that they can actually have all of this data, because it suddenly gives them a unique opportunity to guide and kind of be a better doctor for the patient, because now they have all of the data of the patient. But I also think that this also creates a gap, because it's not all citizens or all patients who have the trust within the digital solutions to accept that all of this data is suddenly being transferred automatically to the doctor. So the trust, and I think the trust really lies, it's a huge obstacle for society to make sure that the trust is not, or the lack of trust is not suddenly creating a team and a B team. The A citizens
You,
who can suddenly access specialized healthcare, and the B citizens who don't trust the digital solutions enough to access the specialized healthcare. Mm.
the anti-digitalizers,
Yeah,
maybe. Um, you mentioned, of course, when you phrased it before, the patients and the citizens.
yeah.
Um, the citizens would often be people that, well, are not patients yet, maybe,
Or
or
maybe not
or maybe
identifying
not
themselves.
anymore. I'm sorry.
Yeah, maybe not. I think the citizens are those who do not identify themselves as a patient, because I believe all citizens are patients. But it's like an identity issue. Do you see
Hmm.
yourself as generally healthy or generally sick? Yeah,
Hmm. But yeah, yes, but maybe also though, do you think it's the same? I mean, when you have as you do, a clear medical need for the app or the digital device or whatever to do a certain uh, task for you. Um, I mean, there's other types of healthcare devices or healthcare services or apps out there um, that is not necessarily about whether the person, I suppose, would consider himself or herself or themselves to be healthy or not, but also it's more that they are trying to promote um, a healthy or a health promoting behavior of some kind, which is slightly different than trying to strike a particular medical need.
yeah,
But would the process maybe for these digital developers be the exact same? I mean, it seems to me that there might be a difference between people that know that they have a specific need or actually have an idea that there's a need that they have, whereas there's other people that, well, they don't think that they have a need at all,
yeah.
but they might over time develop a need because they didn't think that there was a need. But would the digital developers need to need sorry? But would they should they approach the from an anthropological co-creative way, this in the same way,
I
whether
guess
it's one or
I
the other?
guess it I guess it depends on their goal. Would they strive for success, for a lot of downloads? Would they strive to change the lives of citizens? Then, yes, I definitely believe that the
Mhm.
co-creative approach would be yet another step to ensure that what they are actually developing is going to be sustainable and it's going to be a success. It's like, would you like to build a big Lego castle that would collapse when you put the last dot onto the brick brick castle? No. Why would you do that? Why would you put so much effort into a product that where the whole foundation has been built wrong? So that will be my question to all innovation that is going to happen, where citizens are going to be, or patients are going to be the target group. Whoever the target group are, you need to make sure that they actually have the need for what you're going to develop. And they might not need know it right now. They might not know that they have a need, but still you need to make sure that they are actually going to use it. And to figure that out, you need to talk to them, or you need to be hiring an anthropologist who are going to investigate what is the need of the citizens.
How has either your perception about the digital, I mean, you had to do the EHP6 virtually instead of physically.
Yes.
So, in that sense, a very practical example of how you've had to adapt to a pandemic age.
Yeah.
But in light of or thinking of your view of digital tools, has that changed during the pandemic or during the last couple of years, where there's certainly been a kind of a shift in the focus on digital solutions?
Yeah, I really, really believe that the COVID pandemic ensured that I was suddenly able to enter societies and opportunities that I would never have the opportunity to do before, because I am bound to my home. I have two sick children. I am most often not able to travel. Most often, I'm not able to go down city to make grocery because they are sick and I have to be close by. But the COVID pandemic accelerated this whole digital era. So suddenly, instead of being isolated in my house, I was suddenly able to share my passion with like minded peers all over the world. And I was able to suddenly get all of the best doctors to unite digitally, which would not have happened before the COVID pandemic. So for me, the COVID pandemic is a tragedy, but I also believe that there is opportunities to learn from the COVID pandemic that will make sure that we have a much stronger, more sustainable healthcare system afterwards. Sorry.
Do
Yeah.
do you do you think that the people that you collaborate with, I mean, um, in this case, you mentioned the doctors, but I'm not. The doctors here are just. I'm not. Trying to out a particular group of healthcare professionals, but do you think these doctors agree? Um, have they? I
Yeah.
mean,
I think it has been a transformation. In the beginning, it was very difficult, and it was like practicalities like, oh, we have a firewall, we can't use that, we can't use Zoom, we can't use Meet, we can't. It was trying to find a common platform where all of the hospitals from all over the world didn't have firewalls to block. Um, it was it was very difficult in the beginning, but when we suddenly found the platform, then it was like, oh, the opportunities. Like, we don't have to sit beside each other to work together. So, from reading about each other in papers and reading the other work that someone has done, to suddenly unite around a table and collaborate across countries, across continents, across specialties, it has really, really strengthened the research within the field I work in, which is endocrinology and metabolism. And so I believe from a research point of view, this has really accelerated the collaboration across the whole world. But from a doctor's perspective, I sense that there is some kind of frustration about feeling that the e-health and the telemedicine solutions is not quite as good, and they are missing the human interaction. They are missing to actually have hands-on communication with the parents and the child. So there is limitations to the e-health and the telemedicine solutions. But they have also said that, well, what we can see is also that we can suddenly have the patients who used to travel from abroad to be seen, they can suddenly come in every 3 months instead of once a year, because they can have that communication. So it has also strengthened the care for some of the most fragile patients.
So talking about benefits, there's downsides, obviously, to a lot of people in the pandemic. About 500,000 downsides. But what are then either the downside of the situation that we're in, or also some of the barriers? I mean, we've learned now to collaborate better in a digital uh, way. Would a barrier then be to maintain that new culture, or how in terms of barriers do you see before us?
I think that the success of the use of digital health and telemedicine has been so massive that there is no way that this can be lost even when the pandemic is over. So, and that is both from a research perspective, but also from a doctor-patient perspective. When we now know that we can actually be seen by an expert instead of a GP, we can do it virtually. It will not have an economic burden on us, and the children will suddenly access specialized care that can save their lives. If they ever forget, I will make sure to remind them why we are doing this, why we are using digital solutions.
Lo and behold. But do you think then the support from either the authorities or maybe the European Union, or the scientific community, that we have the tools in place that would enable this to really thrive?
Not yet, but I think it is going to take some time. We are currently seeing initiatives from the European Union to invest in projects investigating how to really expand the digital literacy across Europe. So I think it has taken time to get there, where we are also seeing the funding come with the interest in digital health. But I really believe that yes, we need to be patient, but we also need to speak up and continue to advocate for digital literacy and to advocate for telemedicine in Europe.
And we indeed also have a question from the audience, whether
Yes.
you think that we are getting a better sense from all this recent experience about what sorts of conditions or questions that are better suited or not for telemedicine.
I really hope that that question is going to be researched by someone. Hopefully, someone will be a collaboration by experts, by experience, the patients and the caregivers and the citizens and the healthcare professionals. Because I really, really think that if we are to use telemedicine in the future, we need to use it in places where it's appropriate, where it works, where we have documentation that this can actually work in this matter. Like, would you say to a cancer patient that they are terminal in an e-health solution? Is that good? Is that better than being in person? What can be said where? And I don't think currently we have the research backing up when and where the telemedicine is used best. But I hope that that will be an emerging research area in the future. So great question.
Would would you say then that the research, um, funding or um, programs that would give us some of these answers, that it is in place?
Come again?
Well, if you think that to answer the question, that we need more research, do
Yeah.
we have the programs that can carry out this research?
Well, I saw some few interesting calls from the Horizon platform where digital literacy is going to be investigated. So I think it's about creative thinking, how to frame something within the scope of the Horizon platform. But furthermore, we are lucky to have the Erasmus Plus platform where smaller projects can be initiated. And then I simply think that we have generally a pretty good collaborative approach between researchers in Europe, the Got-IT projects being one of them. It's simply about speaking up, collaborating, reaching out, creating a brainstorming document, figuring out who could the partner be, what research opportunities and funding opportunities do we currently have, because the great minds are there, and if they are so great, and I know they are, the funding will come.
Um, One of the things that the European Union is looking at quite a lot in the coming years would be cancer, um, because it affects a lot of people, um, and it can often, I suppose, be a good um, a good idea to invest your money where there's a lot of people that would benefit from what you do.
Yeah.
Um, Sometimes you have situations where you have very few people that have
Yes.
a particular kind of ailment. Um, would it be a good idea to then place them at the back of the queue?
Well, you know my answer to that question. So,
I have an idea,
if
yes.
if it wasn't very clear from the beginning, I suffer from a rare undiagnosed disease. It is called pathological idiopathic Cathodic hypoglycemia, meaning we have accelerated metabolism with unexplained low blood sugar. I was diagnosed when I was 26. My children were born with it. Noah was 2 days old when he was found in a coma, and Savannah was 1.5 when she was admitted in ketoacidosis. So, what we have in common with the rare disease communities are that we are rare, but when we are united, all of the rare disease communities, we are not rare at all. I believe we are one of the most underserved communities in the world and the patient groups, because the pharma industry does not look at us as a good investment, because we might just be a few hundred patients in the world with the certain disease, but looking at us united, we are really, really many. So, and yeah, so no, I believe, and just to be very clear, we have a lot of cancer diseases which are rare, very rare. So when we are diving into cancer, cancer is a very broad term for a lot of rare diseases. Some of them are not rare, but a lot of them are, and they are underserved too.
Do you then also see, for instance, the move for the development towards better personalized medicine solution? Is that the
Sorry, alone with the kids.
not
Sorry,
at
can
all?
you give me the question again?
Just to be mindful of whether you want to close the door again,
Oh,
but the question was whether the development of new personalized solutions is that sort of the solution for you as a rare patient, or is it a solution for us all?
yes, yes, I was. There is different approaches to personalized medicine. I believe that if all babies all over the world were tested with a blood sample when they were born, and they could have the whole genome sequenced, seriously, we would need another planet for all of the patients and, or sorry, all of the citizens who would suddenly live, because all of the diseases would be found so early. But personalized medicine is a very interesting topic. Currently, we are seeing loads of patients who are undiagnosed with rare symptoms. We simply just don't know what's wrong with them, because finding someone like them is very difficult. It's not a lot of people in the world who had a genome sequencing. So yes, I definitely believe that if we could start diving into the genetics of citizens in general, it's kind of an ethical, interesting topic, especially in bioethics. So what will be found, and what is disease causing, and what is benign? Yes, it's very, very interesting. All patients, all citizens, all humans will have mutations, But to figure out the pathological mutations, that is a whole different era, and it's very, very difficult. But a big step would be to try to map, to figure out, okay, currently we are working on a project on a group of Ashkenazi Jewish patients in New York who has Cathodic hypoglycemia. We're trying to send all of the exome data to Denmark to map it, because once you have one person's data, it will be so difficult to find that mutation causing the cathodic hypoglycemia. But when we suddenly have a whole group who are very closely linked biological, we can suddenly start to map and figure out, okay, can we see mutations that goes on in all of the patients?
If you, well, not but if we were to sequence all of these babies, well, people, and try to develop personalized solutions for all of them, um, would that also, I mean, lead to a way of medicalizing or treating everyone as a patient? I mean, people are first and foremost just people.
Yeah,
How
I,
do
I
is that an ethical challenge too?
definitely, and that's totally not my table. What I dream of is if we can unite all of the patients who are undiagnosed, make whole genome sequencing on them, figuring out how to cluster them in symptoms, finding out what is actually what do they have in common. Like, we have a quite interesting group in Cathodic Hypoglycemia International, because what we have in common is that we are all unexplained. We are all idiopathic. But when we describe the clinical pictures, we can start to group ourselves. And one of those groups were all of the children who had Down syndrome. And the children with Down syndrome now have scientific papers explaining a metabolic pathway that would explain why they now have been found to have cathodic hypoglycemia. So if we can start look into the patient journeys as data where we can start to cluster the undiagnosed, then I believe it's suddenly possible to also use the exome data and the genetic mapping to find new diseases and new explanations, and hopefully also new cures for the children and the patient undiagnosed.
Um, for a lot of these digital developers, whether we're talking about well, something that's health promotion or some kind of monitoring app or tool or device that uses these data, a lot of them generate data of various kinds, and there's then also a lot of people that are a bit hesitant on sharing those data with just anyone. Um, but what you're talking about before about gathering all of these data from genomes and so on, and then
Yeah.
using it in a large database, that requires a lot of people to be willing to share that data.
When you're
Um,
afraid of losing your child every time you lay them down to sleep, the desperation goes beyond any mistrust you will have to any system. So yes, I definitely believe that the healthy caregiver or the healthy citizen might be hesitant, but looking into the desperation of the families who are afraid of losing their children, this will, yeah, I can only say from the perspective of the 1,300 families in KHI, I have not seen that being a problem at all. On the contrary, I have seen them desperate to ask who will take my data and figure out what is wrong with me, who will take my child's data and try to find out what's wrong so we can find a cure. Yeah.
um, a question from the audience about also then, I mean, um, is who will do something? What role does this, well, communication, visibility, being able to share by numbers or by a good story?
Yeah.
How does that? What place did that? What role does visibility play in the aspect of empowerment for,
Well,
well, for rare disease patients or in general?
I can say from the perspective of being a rare disease patient, caregiver, and a leader of the organization, the visibility was key to create momentum, both for pharma industry, but also for the doctors. We were very lucky in KHI that we had my brother, he's a graphical designer, so very quickly our appearance looked very professional and we were taken seriously very quickly. So we were able to reach both doctors but also industry partners. But we've quickly realized that one thing is to have a great community outreach. But if we are to push research forward, we need to play on the agenda where research are being conducted. We needed to publish on scientific journals. So we have like two elements of our visibility. We have the outreach, we have the narratives of the families of the patients. We held a conference in February where we had 50% of the presentations were scientific and 50% were patient journeys, simply describing the narratives of these children. And suddenly we were able to turn around a medical consensus that cathodic hypoglycemia was simply a normal variation of childhood, to suddenly have all of the doctors all over the world starting to advocate that this was more than normal variation and we needed to challenge that perception, because it was life threatening for the children being met by such healthcare professionals because they simply didn't know better. So suddenly we were able to, with the narratives, we were able to create a momentum. And now we have, with the scientific visibility, we have now been able to actually advocate within the healthcare system, patient voices within science, and that is so powerful.
Um, as a then as sort of both as a follow-up question to that, um, I mean the loudest voices get the most visibility, but
Yeah.
the follow-up question is both if we need to differentiate between negative and positive visibility, but also a good question how to balance. I mean, if you're really good at being visible, um, you're also overshadowing someone who's not as good as at that. What do you think sometimes about the? Is it just survival of the fittest?
I guess when you have a child who could die, then it's survival of the fittest. But what we are pretty good at in the rare disease organization is to empower each other and to work together, figuring out, oh, how did you do that animation video? Where did you get funding? So we are collaborating a lot within the rare disease communities. It can be a struggle. It's a survival of the fittest, fighting for the funding, fighting for the doctors. Often we are sharing the same experts, but we have found that if we are working together, creating momentum for the patient-driven research and really speaking the voice of the patients who are involved, we are much stronger than when we are apart.
All right. Um, for as a Christmas wish, I suppose. Christmas is not that far away, and I think you may have already started writing your wish list. Um, what would you dream of? I mean, in terms of digital health, I know that somewhere on the wish list would probably be a cure, but
Yeah.
that's a different matter. What would you hope that we would see in the coming years in digital health? More research solutions, or more funding for digital development, or more interest, or more co-creation? All of the above, or what would you
I
hope to
really,
see?
I really dream of the patients, the citizens who are involved in the co-created processes, who are pushing the digital health forward, who are coming with innovative ideas to how to improve the digital health, that their narratives become more visible. Because I believe that through the narratives of the citizens, the caregivers, and the patients, I believe the trust will really start to improve. So if we're working instead of only on the scientific side, that only reaches a certain scientific community. And we are starting to combine both the scientific but also the community outreach through other channels and using the narratives of those involved, because all of these great ideas in digital health, they come from an urgent need of something. It's like they come from something. We need to know the why behind the app.
And are you then either from a project point of view or research point of view, how can we better than either the we or the we as a health research community, how can we then also promote these patient stories better? Are we doing a good job at that currently?
Um, no, I really, really believe that we have a vital role in empowering the patient and the citizens we're working with to speak up, and also the developers. The developers are developing these solutions for a reason. Speak up. Why have you come up with this idea? It's like I have an anthropological background, and when we are studying something, we are studying it out of an interest or out of a curiosity. We need to investigate where did the curiosity come from with the developers suddenly wrapped into this app, which is going to help diabetes patients or cancer patients. Or we need to figure out the why, because when we have the why, we can start talking about the journey from the app with an idea to when it is suddenly out on the market.
Interesting. Um, and I suppose then it'll be fascinating to see some great co-creative approaches or projects in the future by you. And also, if anyone should forget about the cause of the rare diseases, you'll definitely be there to fight them on it. Um,
Of course,
it of
always.
course, of course. Um, it was a pleasure that you joined us today, Danielle. Thank you very
Thank you
much
for
for joining.
inviting me.
Got it, folks.